If we look at the kids who are outperforming everyone in this country, the expectation is that your education is everything.
Absolutely.
And you will do well, you will listen, you will learn. And it's not acceptable. Anything else is unacceptable, that you just, are acting out at school and all of this other stuff. There's that expectation there is huge. But parents are not just saying it, they're also putting action behind building it so that the student can be really focused at school. And I think it's just really important for parents to do their part, right? And this is not a finger pointing thing.
Right.
This is more of I'm coming from an educational space. Like, if someone told me that if I invested XYZ in my child, how it would show up in their education, I wouldn't question that for a second, right? And I would understand that teachers are doing this as well at school. It's not like we're asking you to do something that we don't want to do. It's going to take both of us. So,
welcome back to the 32nd episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives. I'm Frederick.
And I'm Tiffany.
Today we're going to discuss education in America, and with the changes that are being made on the federal level, and the how people are concerned about how education is coming towards their children right now. We want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. But before we do, Tiffany, you got some things to say?
I do. I want to show you how excited we are about the fact that we have over 400 plus subscribers on our YouTube channel. Yay! Like, it has grown so much over the last week. Like, it seems like we're getting about like 40 or so a day. Like, we're finally taking off. We appreciate you so much. You know that our goal is to reach 1,000 as quickly as possible. So please keep sharing and subscribing. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, and this is awesome because, we noticed when we went through the analytics that there were a lot of people watching and listening to the podcast, but not as many people subscribing. So now that people are actually hitting that button, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're getting feedback and having conversations with people, having conversations outside of the podcast that are a little deeper and more private. We just really appreciate that. It's motivating and inspirational to us. So please continue to feel like this is a space where you can have a deep, meaningful conversation, and we will talk back to you, because that's the purpose of this, is to open up a space where people can have conversations that they might not be able to.
And in keeping with what you just said, we're going to go ahead and get started with the episode. All right, we are back. And, there's been a lot of talk, especially with folks out of the White House who are trying to dismantle the Department of Education. But even beyond that, Americans as a whole are concerned with the level of education and the types of education that are going to the kids. And it seems like people are directing their ire towards teachers. Have you felt any of that?
Absolutely. And I am not here to say that, the problem isn't partly on what's going on inside the school walls, because it is, right? But there's so many variables that we can't all talk about them all today. There's so much going on. But I would say that I feel that society really thinks that teachers are the ones who can, has all the power to push students forward academically or not. And while we do, obviously we play a part in that, I think the missing piece is the child's first teacher, which is the parent.
Yes.
And I'm not claiming to speak for every teacher. Obviously, I can't and I won't.
Right.
But my minor is in child development. And I remember that being a big, huge push, is that you as a parent are your child's first teacher. And so they're spending anywhere from, let's just say if they start kindergarten, right? They're with you for 5 years solidly before they go anywhere else. And what they get before they step into the school is absolutely crucial to how they're going to perform. It's not everything, but it is a huge part of it. The more involvement parents have prior to school age time just impacts the child I can't even explain how much it
Yeah.
does. So the average child who's read
Hmm.
at least like 5 books a day,
Hmm.
walks into the school doors with 1.4 million more vocabulary words than the child who doesn't have that.
Yes.
Right. And so that gap is not easily closed in a 6.5 hour day with 20 to 30 students and all the other challenges that go along with being in the classroom. That gap is going to need to be closed also by what happens at home. It is crucial. I don't claim to understand exactly for a parent how hard it must be to balance work life, home life, family life with helping your child in school. But I can say that 0 to 5, really 0 to 7, I think I would say, those years are so crucial in the amount of investment that you put into your child will make a huge impact on how they do at school, not just academically, but also socially and emotionally. It all goes together. And I think that there needs to be a little more talk around
Hmm.
how parents can make that impact, even with a very extremely busy schedule,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, and so you talked a little bit about having kids come to school with a wider vocabulary, but what about in terms of socially? Because you have kids that come to school from all different home situations,
Mhm.
and that also has an effect on how they show up at school every day.
I mean, I highly suggest that families um, make an impact socially by taking your kids to the library when they're very young to
Yeah.
be around other young kids and kind of listen to a story from the library. And a lot of these libraries do activities as well.
Yeah.
So getting them exposed to that, allowing them to make mistakes in front of others, how you interact with them when there is a mistake. Are you trying to rescue them, or are you allowing them to
Hmm.
feel what's going on with the peer? I mean, this impacts them socially greatly. If they're constantly being saved, then it's harder for them to navigate their own feelings and their own interactions with friends when it is time to go to school. And trying to do that as a teacher, along with all the other demands we have, we do it. It's important. We understand that, but it's hard to do all of those things. If more of that was done at home, it would make a huger impact. So a big thing that we talk about is cutting that screen time,
Yes.
which I understand. It's something that really helps parents when they're trying to cook or do whatever it is that they're doing,
Yes.
but try to cut that screen time and give them something active to do that really gets their brain going. And it's not just one way where
Hmm.
something or someone is talking at them through a screen. And also, you can talk to them while you're doing whatever it is that you need to do.
Yes.
And if you must put them on the screen, make sure you're putting them on some quality entertainment or quality learning activities. We grew up with Sesame Street and what was that other one? Schoolhouse Rock
Yeah.
and all of these things that really taught Electric Company. There
Yeah.
was all these things that was a lot, it was educational, and we had
Yes.
fun doing it. And I know there's a
Captain Kangaroo was
yeah,
another one.
yes. And I know that there's a few things out there now, but I don't think kids are watching it the way we watched it when we were younger because there's just so much at their fingertips,
Yes.
especially with the internet.
Hmm.
And so that is killing them socially because don't know how to interact with people,
Right.
how to say things, how to read
Hmm.
expressions, all of that. They're missing out on that. And it's vital for parents to give, or the caregiver to give that child those experiences. Let them see your expressions, make sure you're looking up at them, you're giving them eye contact, that you're asking open-ended questions, not just giving them commands.
Yeah.
That you're asking them to elaborate on things, asking
Hmm.
why, what happened, tell me more, what do you think? Giving them questions that they may not have the answers to, but surprisingly, kids always have a little something to say, and
Yes,
giving
they
them
do.
that space to do that, the more they feel confident talking and having a conversation back and forth, that's going to play into the classroom.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. And really not just thinking about the academics, but the emotional intelligence of the child, of being able to deal with different types of other kids. I would imagine, and you let me know if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that that's just as much of a challenge as getting kids to read and write.
I would say it might be more of a challenge the older they are and they missed out on those opportunities younger because
Yes.
now you're trying to undo and reteach and
Right.
and teach for the first time. But it is absolutely important to work on that social emotional piece. I know that there's talk out there, in some groups where they feel like that there's too much of that going on.
Hmm.
But because there's not enough of it actually before they even step into school, kids are not able to access the information the same way because they're still dealing with all of these emotional issues that,
Hmm.
and when my students have trouble with a friend, they literally don't know what to say or do. It's hard for them to even come up with something. They want you to do the talking for them, and they
Right.
need to learn to be able to deal with people. That is the number one thing you're going to have to do throughout your whole life, right? Is be able to talk to people, whether they're in your family, in your neighborhood, or at school. You
Yes.
need to know how to communicate how you feel and to listen to another person and kind of synthesize
Absolutely.
that information where kids are like, you're going to say something, I'm going to say something, and that's it. They're not
Yes.
actually communicating with each other. And I'm trying to take the time to do that with kids now, but keeping in mind that that takes away time from other things that we're doing.
Yes.
While it's both important, again, if it was done more before they enter school, it would be so much easier to get through the day and actually understand. Even if we're reading about someone or
Yeah.
something, they have a better understanding of it because they've had that practice on their own. I mean, the biggest thing I think to keep in mind is that learning doesn't just take place in school. It's every
No.
single day, especially as a child. Everything's new to them. Everything is eye-opening. Everything's a possibility. I mean, really with all of us, right? We want to be lifelong learners.
Yes.
And so you have to treat them as such when you're, working with them at
Hmm.
home. It's not something like sit down with this book and do 20 pages. It's just a conversation, including them in what you're doing, making sure that they are able to express how they feel and
Hmm.
have some kind of thought about what's going on. Like, don't take "I don't know" as an
Hmm.
answer so often from kids because they have thoughts. They're just worried it's not right,
Right.
right? And so we want them to get out of that because a lot of times we learn things from kids, but if we don't give them that space to talk and think and make mistakes
Hmm.
comfortably, it shows up in the classroom where they're either not talking at all because they're
Hmm.
afraid to say anything,
Hmm.
or they don't have anything to say. There's a lot of "I don't know" because they haven't been given that space regularly,
Right.
right? Just think if for 5 to 7 years, if you practice something, how good you'd be at it,
Yes.
right? And so the same with kids, and they're sponges. It's even easier when they're younger. I mean, we've seen kids on social media, we've seen them very young, being very articulate and
Yes.
well thought out. Well, that's because the adults in their lives talk to them that way.
Yes.
It's not magic. I mean, sometimes you do get kids who very young, they just seem to,
Hmm.
you know, of course they come with a certain thing when they come to the world, but
Hmm.
how we develop it is absolutely crucial. And TK and kindergarten needs more of that social emotional piece.
Yes.
And of course, we still got to throw in a little academics. We feel that we have to, even though experts say let's pull back on that and give these kids a chance to play and grow and make mistakes and develop relationships, but we're trying to play catch up, because of how we're performing, right?
Right.
But when we compare ourselves to some other countries, we need to think about it's not just like, oh, those teachers at that school in the other countries are so perfect. It's the community, it's everything about it, right?
Right.
Like how people feel about teachers in those other countries, how teachers are actually paid, and how they're treated, what the expectation are for kids. If we look at the kids who are outperforming everyone in this country, the expectation is that your education is everything and
Absolutely.
you will do well, you will listen, you will learn, and it's not acceptable. Anything else is unacceptable, that you just, are acting out at school and all of this other stuff. There's
Hmm.
that expectation there is huge. But parents are not just saying it, they're also putting action behind building it so that the student can be really focused
Hmm.
at school. And I think it's just really important for parents to do their part, right? And this is not a finger pointing thing.
Right.
This is more of an I'm coming from an educational space. Like, if someone told me that if I invested XYZ in my child,
Hmm.
how it would show up
Yes.
in their education, I wouldn't question that for a second, right? And
Right.
I would understand that teachers are doing this as well at school. It's not like we're asking you to do something that we don't want to do. It's going to take both of us. So in school, the big piece for me has always been parent, teacher, child, like that triangle. If any
Hmm.
one of those points are broken, we're going to have more difficulty.
Yeah. And where I see that this becomes even more important when you step a little bit outside of the pure academics, but into the social emotional learning, is that these kids become adults with the exact same problems.
Right.
And the way I know it is, after school, and you're telling me about, well, this child had an issue with this child, or this child didn't speak up because of this reason. And here I am working with all adults, and I see the same thing.
Right.
I see the exact same thing. So even if they're able to read and write, of course, better, and they're doing that at an advanced level, but they still don't know the emotional intelligence.
Exactly. That's a great point. There are students who are doing really well academically,
Mhm.
but they're still missing that piece where they're just not interacting with other people. They don't know how to interact. They don't know how to process their own feelings. They don't know how to read other people. That piece is missing.
Yes.
And it's huge. Like that, you want your child to be well rounded, your child who's going to be an adult, well rounded. And so you want to expose them to as many different things and not think that learning is just being academically proficient. It's
Right.
so much more than that, right? And so you're not going to be, once you get out into the real world, you're not going to be talking about half the things you talked about in school.
Yeah.
But the point is to teach you how to feel, how
How
to
to learn.
recognize, have some empathy for others.
Yes.
These are all lifelong things. So
Yes.
seeing kids as totally separate from the rest of the world is ridiculous.
Yes.
They are us, right? Like, and so we have to keep in mind how important it is to grow those seeds and give
Hmm.
them the proper nourishment so
Hmm.
that they can be well-rounded human beings and not just in one area, right? We also
Hmm.
don't want someone who's they're totally emotionally intelligent, but they can't read or write,
Right.
right? So we're looking at the entire picture. And if all of us pitch in to do that work,
Hmm.
especially teachers and parents, right? We are going to see those results change. I mean, there's just no other way. And it doesn't matter if you're homeschooling or you're in private school, you're in public school, you're rich, you're not. I mean,
Yeah.
your support is so needed. I remember when I had traveled to another country
Hmm.
and we had met a teacher there who was also from the States. And however, she worked in a very wealthy private sector,
Hmm.
right, in
Right.
schools. And she talked about how the kids were still having issues
Yes.
because a lot of the times one or both of the parents weren't around because maybe one was typically it happened to be the dad. He had a business and he's gone for
Hmm.
weeks or months at a time. That the child on the playground, every time an airplane passed by, they would say, I wonder if my dad is on that plane. They
Mm.
hadn't seen them in so long.
Right.
And then on the flip side, you had, because there was a lot of money there was nannies and things like that. And so the kid was not being raised like by the parent, really.
Right.
And so that impacts them as well. So
Yes.
yes, they may have had all the tutors and all of these type of things, and they could read and stuff like that at a very young age. They were missing that security and that social emotional piece
Yes.
from their family. So it doesn't matter how much money you make or you don't make. This is a human thing.
Yeah, and I saw that a lot growing up because I grew up in areas of diverse socioeconomic levels where you had kids from wealth going to school for kids from lower class environments, and one of the things that you notice, at least sometimes on the academic front, I did notice advantages with the kids that came from more means.
Mhm.
However, from the social front, I didn't notice much of a difference in terms of how well the child was able to interact with others. How well some of them became leaders as opposed to followers, and all those different types, and how well a child would advocate for themselves. That was something where it seemed like across the board was still a problem.
Yeah, I think people think, well, they're kids, they're little, and keeping the innocence, which of course you want them to be innocent, but you could speak up for yourself and still be innocent, right? Like,
Right.
so that's a really important thing. But another thing I wanted to touch on when you said you see a difference between, maybe students who come from wealthier income
Hmm.
families than ones who don't, I I do question, and I don't know the answer to
Hmm.
this, but when I think about countries around the world where
Hmm.
there is a lot of poverty,
Hmm.
they still produce
Yes,
students
they
who
do.
do very well to the
Yes,
point that we're hiring them before we hire the student,
that's
here.
true.
And so it's again that value,
Hmm.
right? Like kids who are they're living on dirt floors, they're
Right.
walking to school 5, 6, 7 miles,
You're right.
taking little boats, all kinds of things to get their education in the dark, by a street lamp, whatever the case may be. But it's important to them.
Yes.
And they know that it's the way out of the situation that they're in.
Yeah.
And I think we here in this society need to have a little more of that,
Hmm.
where we really just put more value on education. It seems like we're putting value because we're
Hmm.
constantly pointing at education and saying how it's failing, but we're
Hmm.
not talking about the changes that we all need to make in order for it to get better.
Yeah.
It's not another teacher with another, labels behind their name.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily even more money, although that would help, right? Because you're
Right.
going to probably draw in some of the better people if you're not, if they feel like they can make a living as well. Because remember, like, while teachers love what they do and they give a lot,
Hmm.
it's still a profession. They have their own family and life to
And
uphold.
school loans and yeah.
Exactly. But we have to understand that there's a value system there's a piece missing there that is also keeping us from growing as a nation educationally.
Hmm.
And it's not just, around how much money you make or the neighborhood that you live in, but the attitude you come to school with and what you come to school with and
Hmm.
what that expectation is. I have never seen a student whose family valued education, reading books,
Hmm.
and talking to them fail like in
Right.
school, unless there's like a disability or something. They tend to do so much better because that how can you not, right? If someone's talking to you all the time and reasoning with you and
Hmm.
allowing you that space to do that as well, how can you not succeed in
Yeah.
that environment?
Yeah, and it looks like it kind of goes into something that we've been talking about for the longest in terms of everything in society is that we have to do better. We have to stop leaning on the systems that are in place to fix our reality when we really need to fix it, ourselves. So what I would ask from you, because you're a second grade teacher,
Mhm.
so how would you want a parent to approach the situation, not only in terms of the collaboration, but what if a parent says, well, I don't like this lesson or I don't like this situation? How would you want them to approach that?
That's a great question. How would I want them to approach? So are you asking me, if parents start talking about what we're doing in school from day to
Hmm.
day?
Yeah, I mean, so say that there's something that you're going to be talking about today, and the parent is not that crazy about the subject matter or the way you are putting it out to the child. What do what would be your advice to that parent?
I would say volunteer at the school,
Yes.
go into the classroom,
Hmm.
and I, this is a real touchy area for me
Yeah.
because I think, and I've had this experience more recently, and I've been teaching for
Hmm.
30 years, but it's been more recent because there's, a lot of accusations about
Right.
things that teachers are doing and saying that are happening maybe in a very small percent, but mostly aren't,
Right.
right? Because of the just what's being spread around. Your child is going to learn some things you might not be ready for them to learn, whether it's in the classroom or on the playground or from friends. And so I think you also need to be prepared to talk to them about some tough things as
Yes.
opposed to, um, I mean, there are things that parents don't want their kids to learn that is very much a part of the world or even in their own classroom.
Right.
And so to expect them or to expect other people to hold back who they are and their stories,
Hmm.
I think is probably unfair.
Hmm.
But I do believe in collaborating in a way that we can have, maybe parents can give input on a lesson. However, that can get really tricky. I don't know. It's
Right.
just
But
like,
but let me ask you this, and because we've seen situations like this, um, what if the parent doesn't really understand what you're trying to put out there to the child? Because I know you've had situations where a parent has gotten upset. Well, why are you talking about this, this, and this? And then you have the discussion. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, that and that's how that needs to go. Like
Right.
that's what I mean. I don't know about every time a teacher's going to teach something, they're going to go and try to
Right.
explain it to 24 people. No,
Right.
that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
But I think that once it's happened, having a discussion with the teacher, if there was something you didn't quite understand, that the
Right.
child didn't quite understand, so of course they said it, came home saying it a certain way. I think it's important to have a relationship with your teacher. That's the bigger thing, is to have a relationship with the teacher. Back to school night is a crucial night
Yes.
to talk about, you know, the teacher is talking about the program and who they are and what they do. And that's a crucial time to ask questions as well and maybe get information about it, you
Mhm.
know. And then just keeping that communication line open with the teachers. I mean, teachers have to do the same thing and keep it open with their students, right? You could do like little questionnaires to kind of see how parents feel about things.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think I like the idea of you're going to tell somebody every single thing you're going to say and do. It's
Right.
not really even possible, right? Because
Yeah.
then if you do that, you're going to have to ignore anything your students bring up.
Right.
You're not going to be able to elaborate on it, have real
Right.
genuine conversations because you're so limited to what you say. Of course, things by age group matter and things
Mhm.
like that, but it's just not, I don't think it's reasonable for someone to tell you every single thing that they're going to say. It's not even.
Yeah, and I get that. I still think, because like I've had, with my children, there have been times that I've had disagreements with the teachers,
Mhm.
but then going up and talking to them, and then them giving their point, and you're like, okay, that absolutely makes sense.
Right.
And instead of just sitting there stewing in anger and frustration, not knowing exactly what happened, having that having that relationship with the teacher where you can say, hey, I don't quite understand this. I need for you to explain this to me.
Mhm.
And then having the conversation.
Right. Don't create a narrative in your mind about what happened
Right.
before you have a conversation
Yes.
about what happened. I think
Yeah.
that's much more important to do
Yeah.
that. I think parents and teachers need to have a better relationship. I think
Mhm.
when you do that, you're going to go further as well. You know, just know that teachers are in general trying to give you suggestions that are help move your child along based on
Mhm.
experience. But you could also do that research yourself. There's so many things out there. There's so many early childhood programs or even Instagrams that you can follow
Mhm.
just to get tidbits of information on what to do. Just know that it's not a job that can be done solely in the classroom. If it could, we would, right? And you
Yeah.
hear about schools that are performing very well, that the
Mhm.
students are performing very well, but you need to know why. You need to,
Right.
you need to look into, well, what's going on there. A lot of the times, those kids walk in the door like 2 years advanced,
Right.
right? And so, of course, a teacher can do so much more with that. In fact, a lot often they're not teaching um, all the little pieces of information that a teacher in a school where a lot of the kids are still struggling a bit are
Mhm.
doing. They could just be like, let's do a project. And the kids understand how to work together, how to
Right.
manage their materials, how to hold a pencil, how to cut. They know how to do all of those things. So you
Yeah.
can do something that's really deeper. But when you say, let's do a project, and they can't hold a pencil and they can't cut, and they don't know how to, if something drops on the floor, look for
Yes.
it, or they can't find their materials, that all makes an impact. And some of those things can be taken care of. We'd like to say all in
Mhm.
kindergarten, but again, at home, kids should be provided with some of those materials where they can start learning how to do that at a much younger age, how to hold things, how to find things, how to have disappointment. All of those things impact the lesson that you do in the classroom. So
Yeah.
again, a lot of these really high performing schools, they're not dealing with all of those
Mhm.
types of things, you know?
Right.
And so I think it's important to talk about that and not just be like, well, they're doing well. Those teachers must be fabulous.
Yeah.
You have to look at the entire picture. I mean, everything, how their day goes,
Right.
all of that.
Mhm.
So a lot of times in these higher performing schools, the
Mhm.
support systems are even different, right?
Yes.
So you have to, they might even have a larger class size, but maybe they have a second teacher all the time. One of my
Mhm.
friends, she is in a wealthier area, and those students all have a second person in the classroom. I
Mhm.
mean, imagine two people taking care of 24 students versus one, right?
Yeah.
And so, and 24 students who came in, you know, with one point
Similarly
four
equipped.
million
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
than,
Yeah.
and more
Yeah.
words and more experiences. Of
Yeah.
course, what you do is going to be different,
Yeah.
right? It's going to have a different outcome. So, my big thing is families. I've always said this since I've been teaching. I think that's where we often should put a lot of our work into,
hmm
instead of, you can analyze the data more and more and more all you want to.
Right.
But the part that's really going to make an impact is, some people think you can't make an impact on families. Yes, you can. I believe you can. I believe that the relationship you build with them makes a difference. The expectation you have for your classroom and your students,
hmm
and your communication with them, they will rise to the occasion.
Absolutely.
And I do believe that it makes a difference. Is it more work as a teacher? Yes. But if you have the whole school doing that, then it gets easier for the next teacher, because they're not starting over. They know that the expectation is, oh, I better check my, parent communication app.
hmm
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, because that's been set up since they walked into school. So there are things that you could do, right? And parents a lot of times just they need help. They need support, right? Like, there's no handbook to parenting exactly, right? Like,
Right.
this, but
Yes.
there are a lot of pieces of information out there to help along with it. And even though I know there's so much that people are dealing with, right? And
Yes.
we're hearing about all these things going on, and it just wears you down and it takes your energy down. It does it to me.
Yes.
If you can't find an hour, find 30 minutes. You can't find 30 minutes, find 15. Can't find 15, find 10. But you have to find that time.
hmm
You have to. You're riding in the car. I don't know. You're at the grocery store. Your kids got their spelling words standing right
Yeah.
next to you. You just have to squeeze it in. You do. It's going to benefit the child so much.
Yeah. And I've seen like some of the things that I've tried to do with my kids when they were younger that I've also seen a lot of people doing out there is not necessarily always taking time away from everything to have those conversations, but while I'm doing something, come on over and let me explain to you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And yeah, I see this all the time with parents and kids at the store. Well, mommy, I want that kind of cereal. Okay, how much does that cereal cost? How much is the tax going to be? Okay, and you wanted this. And so teaching them to kind of think on their own while you're going through your regular day, it seems
Right.
like there's huge value in that as well.
Right. Or just giving them something small to
Right.
learn, like, okay, you want these cereals, but I'm telling you now, the cereal can't have more than 10 grams of sugar per
Right.
serving.
Yeah.
Your child's in the back looking for that
Right.
information, right? It's small, but you don't understand the impact that it has on them, that they're able
Yes.
to do that, because they start to apply it to other things. Well,
Plus, they feel empowered.
They do.
Yeah.
Right. They're a part of the problem and the solution. And,
Yeah.
and they feel important, and they're doing what mommy and daddy, or whoever the caregiver,
Mhm.
they're doing what they're doing. They're, making judgments based on information given to them. And
Mhm.
it carries over. And I don't know if people understand how important and crucial it is to those conversations, are just
Mhm.
have it over dinner. Have those conversations over dinner. Talk about the food you're eating. What
Mhm.
country did it come from? Just putting that vocabulary
Yes.
into them. It doesn't have to be this huge lesson
Right.
where you're just like, okay, we're having spaghetti. Where did that come from? You
Right.
know what I mean? And what are these flavors? What do you taste? What do you smell? What is it? Just getting them to talk about
Yes.
everything
Yes.
is just so valuable, and it creates interest
Yeah.
in other things.
Yeah.
It sparks that opening. So
I think that's great, because one of the things that I see when I look at the studies on education and all that kind of stuff, it really is all based on academics. And not that academics aren't critical, they absolutely are.
mhm.
But there's other pieces to that in terms of building your imagination, building your ability to deal with to work with other people. All that kind of stuff is also important. And I haven't seen any studies and charts and graphs on that. And I think we have to do better. But what I would say as we start to draw this to a close is, for a parent that's concerned with their child's education, what would be your advice as to right now you can start doing to help that situation?
I think the first step would be asking yourself, what part do you play in their
Hmm.
education? And when I say that, like, what things do you do to help them learn? Like,
Hmm.
I would start first with books. Books are probably the hugest thing.
Yeah.
You should be reading to them while they're still in your tummy, or the moment they are, become on the planet,
Hmm.
you want to be reading to them. I would ask things like, do you get them to school on time? Are they
Hmm.
going to bed, early enough? Are they, just is their screen time being monitored?
Hmm.
Um, are they talking to me? Are they talking to other people? How do they feel about their school day? Like, talking to the teacher, how's my child throughout the day? How do they handle, not just how do they do on that reading test, but how do they handle problems with their friends?
Hmm.
Do they come up to you? Do they
Absolutely.
ask questions? Do they raise their hand? Do you
Hmm.
see, are they alone at recess? Like, all of these pieces are so important. I would start with asking all of that, maybe asking to see the curriculum, what's in
Hmm.
it? What is my child expected to know?
Hmm.
Talking to other parents, how are they doing? And then doing your own research, go on the internet, type
Yeah.
in exactly whatever your question is. And I'm not saying the internet's always 100% true, but there's a lot of information there. Follow teacher pages.
Hmm.
They give there's some fabulous teacher pages out there that give you simple little things that you could do at home,
Hmm.
and I think that start with yourself and what you're doing, and then reach to the teacher and
Hmm.
also your child. Are they coming home every day saying, I don't know? And have that expectation from them that when I ask you about your day, what did you learn? I don't know is not going to be okay. You're going to be
Right.
able to tell me three different things about three different things. I'm expecting that.
Yes.
Hold them to that expectation. Make them sit there until they answer you. Because 9 times out of 10, they do know. I don't know is a quick way to, I want to
Yes.
move on. Right. And
And it
so,
works.
right. Yeah. And I think just putting that system in place of
Hmm.
how they can see how education is important to you,
Hmm.
then it's going to be most likely important to them.
Hmm.
Hopefully, they see you reading as well. Um, I would start with that. If your child is struggling, start with yourself. What am I doing or not doing? Am I having them do the work the teacher's asking them to do? Am I monitoring it?
Hmm.
Like, am I having my child go sit and practice reading when I know they don't know how to read? And so,
Right.
if you're practicing it by yourself, who's listening to you? Who's
Right.
correcting you? What part are you playing in that? I would start there. Really, honestly, I would start there. And then, of course, secondary would be the teacher and what's going
Hmm.
on throughout the day while they're with you all day,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think that's great. And so while we wind this down, are there any final messages you wanted to put out there?
No, I just feel I want parents to know it's a partnership.
Yes.
And just like you could think of it like your marriage, it's a
Hmm.
partnership and how you work together in order
Hmm.
to have the family that you want. The same thing goes for having the education you want for your child, the experience, I want to say, because when people say education, they're automatically thinking reading, writing, math,
Right.
and it's more than that. It's
Yeah,
what you're
absolutely.
reading, it's how you're solving the math. It's, does your child see themselves in school? There's so many layers to that.
Hmm.
I just want people to take a better step back and look at, what does being educated really mean?
Yeah.
I would ask you to ask yourself, that parent, that question, I'm sorry, what does it look like for me that my child is well educated and well-rounded educated? What do I want that to look like?
Right.
And write all of that down, and then start to look into those different areas of how you can help improve those different things so they can be more successful in school and in life, really in life. Right?
Awesome. Awesome. And I really appreciate your perspective and being a teacher for so long. And you've been critical to helping me be a better parent to Joseph, who's 16, and his grades definitely show, but not just his grades, but his emotional growth has benefited from your guidance and stuff like that. So I really appreciate it. But so now, as we close down this episode, this 32nd episode of Love, Growth, and Narratives, I'm Frederick.
And I'm Tiffany.
Thank you so much. See you next week.
Bye.